The silence that fell over Westfield Academy's pristine hallway was so thick it seemed to have weight. Conversations ceased. Locker doors froze half open, and dozens of eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding near the main office. 17-year-old Marcus Chen stood with his back against his locker, thick glasses slightly askew, clutching his worn backpack like a shield. His shirt pocket was stuffed with pens, and a calculator hung from his belt loop. The group of seniors surrounding him wore identical smirks of anticipation. "Time to pay up, calculator boy," sneered Jake Morrison, captain of the lacrosse team and son of the town's most prominent attorney. "You know the rules. Nerds pay tax in this hallway." Marcus pushed his glasses up his nose, a nervous habit that had become more frequent since transferring to this elite private school 3 weeks ago. His scholarship to Westfield Academy was supposed to be his ticket to a better future, but so far it had only made him a target. "I don't have any money," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the murmur of gathering students. "Then maybe you shouldn't be here," Jake replied, reaching for Marcus's backpack. "Poor kids belong in public school." "Leave him alone." The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Everyone turned to see a girl approaching with confident strides. She wore the same uniform as the other students, but somehow made it look effortlessly elegant. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes blazed with determination. Jake's expression immediately shifted. "Sophie, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when I see 5 guys picking on someone half their size," Sophie replied, positioning herself between Marcus and his tormentors. "Don't you have anything better to do?" the crowd whispered among themselves. Sophie Montgomery was untouchable at Westfield Academy. Her father's donations had built half the school, and everyone knew crossing her meant crossing one of the most powerful families in the state. But what they didn't know was that Sophie's interest in Marcus went far beyond simple compassion. "Your daddy's money won't always protect you," Jake muttered, but he was already backing down. "Come on, guys, let's go." As the group dispersed, Sophie turned to Marcus, who was staring at her with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, still too stunned to speak properly. In his 3 weeks at Westfield, no one had ever stood up for him. Most students either ignored him completely or treated him like an unwelcome intruder in their privileged world. "I'm Sophie," she said, extending her hand. "Marcus," he replied, shaking it hesitantly. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Sophie's voice carried a weight that surprised him. "Walk with me?" They moved down the hallway, past trophy cases filled with decades of academic and athletic achievements. The walls were lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, most of whom had gone on to Ivy League schools and successful careers in law, medicine, and business. "Why did you transfer here?" Sophie asked as they walked. Marcus adjusted his backpack straps. "Academic scholarship. My mom works 3 jobs just to keep our apartment. This place, it's supposed to open doors. And instead, you're getting hassled by idiots like Jake Morrison." "It's not that bad," Marcus lied. Sophie stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus, I've been watching you for 3 weeks. You eat lunch alone in the library. You avoid the common areas. You haven't joined any clubs or activities. That's not that bad. That's survival mode." The accuracy of her observation startled him. "How do you know all that?" "Because I pay attention." Sophie glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Meet me in the old science wing after school, room 237. There's something I want to show you." Before Marcus could respond, the bell rang, and Sophie disappeared into the stream of students heading to their next classes. Marcus stood alone in the hallway, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. At home that evening, in his penthouse office overlooking the city, William Montgomery reviewed the monthly reports from his various investments. Montgomery Industries had started as a small construction company and had grown into a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning real estate, technology, and renewable energy. William's success was built on his ability to identify problems and eliminate them efficiently. His assistant, Patricia, knocked on the door. "Mr. Montgomery? Principal Harrison from Westfield Academy is online too." William frowned. Sophie had been at Westfield for 3 years without incident. She was a model student with perfect grades and plans to attend Harvard in the fall. "Put him through." "Mr. Montgomery," Principal Harrison's voice was carefully measured. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "What's this about, Harrison?" "Well, sir, it's about Sophie. There's been a situation with one of our scholarship students, and I felt you should be aware." William's jaw tightened. "What kind of situation?" "The student in question is Marcus Chen. He's been disruptive, getting into altercations with other students, causing tension in the academic environment. Several parents have expressed concerns about the scholarship program and whether these students truly fit our school's culture." "Then what does this have to do with my daughter?" "Sophie has been defending him quite vocally. Today, she confronted a group of students who were simply trying to maintain order. It's created an uncomfortable dynamic, and frankly, some of our major donors are beginning to question whether the scholarship program aligns with Westfield's values." William understood the subtext immediately. The major donors Harrison was referring to included families who had been at Westfield for generations, families who expected their children to attend school with their own kind. The scholarship program was a relatively new addition, implemented primarily for tax benefits and public relations. "What are you suggesting, Harrison?" "Perhaps it would be best if Mr. Chen found a more suitable academic environment. Somewhere he might be more comfortable. The transition has clearly been difficult for him, and continuing to force integration might not be in anyone's best interest." William was quiet for a long moment. Sophie had never shown interest in social causes before. She was focused, ambitious, and practical like him. This sudden concern for a scholarship student seemed out of character. "How much?" William asked finally. "Excuse me? How much to make this problem disappear quietly? I assume you can find academic reasons for the transfer." There was a pause. "Mr. Montgomery, I wouldn't want you to think we're simply—" "Harrison, I've been making donations to Westfield for 15 years. I built your new gymnasium and your computer lab. I'm not asking you to do anything unethical. I'm asking you to solve a problem that's apparently affecting my daughter's academic environment. Name your price." Another pause. "The school's endowment fund could use a significant boost. Perhaps $100,000 would allow us to review Mr. Chen's academic performance more thoroughly and determine if Westfield is truly the right fit for his educational needs." "Done. But I want this handled discreetly. No drama, no confrontations. The boy simply finds out that his academic performance isn't meeting Westfield's standards." "Of course, Mr. Montgomery. I'll take care of everything." After hanging up, William stared out his office window at the city lights below. He had built his empire by controlling variables, eliminating uncertainties. If Sophie was being distracted by some misguided attempt to help a struggling student, the logical solution was to remove the distraction. By tomorrow, Marcus Chen would be gone, and Sophie could refocus on her own future. What William didn't realize was that Sophie's interest in Marcus went far deeper than simple compassion. In room 237 of the old science wing, secrets were being shared that would change everything he thought he knew about his daughter. The old science wing of Westfield Academy felt like a different world. Built in the 1940s, it had been largely abandoned when the new STEM center was constructed 5 years earlier. The hallways were dimmer, the lockers older, and the classrooms filled with outdated equipment that the school hadn't bothered to remove. Marcus found room 237 easily enough. The door was slightly ajar, and warm light spilled into the corridor. He knocked hesitantly before pushing it open. "Sophie?" "In here," her voice called from deeper in the room. Marcus stepped inside and stopped in amazement. The old chemistry classroom had been completely transformed. The lab benches were covered with computer equipment, circuit boards, and half-assembled electronic devices. Multiple monitors displayed scrolling lines of code, and the walls were covered with whiteboards filled with complex equations and diagrams. "What is this place?" Marcus asked, setting down his backpack. Sophie emerged from behind a bank of servers, wearing jeans and a hoodie instead of her school uniform. Her hair was down, and there were small smudges of grease on her hands. She looked completely different from the polished girl who had defended him in the hallway. "My real classroom," she said with a smile. "Welcome to the place where I actually learn." Marcus walked slowly around the room, taking in the sophisticated setup. He recognized some of the equipment, high-end processors, custom cooling systems, and what appeared to be a quantum computing prototype. This must have cost a fortune. It did. But when your father thinks you're just playing around with computers as a hobby, he doesn't ask too many questions about the credit card bills. "Sophie, this isn't hobby-level stuff. This is graduate-level research equipment." She nodded, pleased that he understood. "I've been working on artificial intelligence applications for predictive analysis, specifically algorithms that can identify patterns in financial markets and predict economic shifts before they happen." Marcus stopped walking and stared at her. "You're developing trading algorithms?" "Not just trading algorithms, comprehensive economic prediction models. I've been testing them against historical data, and the accuracy rates are significant." "How significant?" Sophie pulled up a chart on one of the monitors. 93% accuracy in predicting major market movements over the past 5 years. If these algorithms had been actively trading, they would have generated returns of over 400% annually. Marcus felt his legs go weak. He sank into a nearby chair, trying to process what he was seeing. "Sophie, do you understand what this means? This kind of technology, it could revolutionize financial markets. It could make billions. It could also destabilize entire economies if used irresponsibly," Sophie replied quietly. "That's why I've been working alone. That's why I needed someone I could trust." "Trust with what?" Sophie sat down across from him, her expression serious. "Marcus, I've been watching you for 3 weeks, but not just because you were being bullied. I've been watching because you're the only person in this school who might understand what I'm really doing here." She pulled out a folder and handed it to him. Inside were printed copies of academic papers, research proposals, and what appeared to be correspondence with universities. "MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon," Marcus read aloud. "They're all offering you full scholarships and research positions." "Why are you still at Westfield?" "Because my father expects me to go to Harvard, major in business, and eventually take over Montgomery Industries. He has my entire life planned out, and none of those plans include artificial intelligence research or economic theory." Marcus looked up from the papers. "So you're hiding all of this from him?" "I'm preparing. When I turn 18 in 6 months, I'll have legal control of my trust fund. I'll be able to make my own decisions about college and my career. But until then, I have to keep my father from finding out what I'm really passionate about." "Why are you telling me this?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because I need help. The algorithms are working, but I need someone to help me refine them. Someone who understands advanced mathematics and programming. Someone who won't try to steal my work or sell me out to my father." "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you. Marcus, I've seen your transcript. You've been taking college-level courses online for 2 years. Your SAT scores are in the 99th percentile. You're not just some scholarship kid who got lucky. You're brilliant." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. No one had ever called him brilliant before. At his old school, he had been smart but not exceptional. At Westfield, he had felt like an imposter from day one. "What would you need me to do?" "Help me perfect the algorithms. Help me prepare for the patent applications, and help me figure out how to present this research to the universities without my father finding out." Marcus looked around the room again, at the sophisticated equipment and the groundbreaking research. 3 weeks ago, he had been just another poor kid trying to survive at an elite school. Now he was being offered the chance to work on technology that could change the world. "There's something else," Sophie said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something I haven't told you about my father." "What?" "He's not just wealthy, Marcus, he's ruthless. When problems arise that threaten his plans or his family's reputation, he makes them disappear. If he ever found out about my research, about what I'm really planning to do with my life—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood the implication. William Montgomery wasn't the type of man who would simply be disappointed in his daughter's choices. He would actively work to prevent them. "Are you asking me to help you lie to your father?" "I'm asking you to help me protect my future. And in return, I'm offering to help you build yours." Marcus thought about his mother, working 3 jobs to pay rent on their small apartment. He thought about the full scholarship opportunities Sophie was showing him, and the chance to work on technology that could change both of their lives forever. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm in." Sophie smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he had seen from her. "Then let's get started." They worked until nearly 9 o'clock that evening, with Sophie explaining her research methodology and Marcus asking increasingly sophisticated questions about the algorithmic structures. By the time they packed up to leave, Marcus felt more intellectually stimulated than he had in months. "Same time tomorrow?" Sophie asked as they locked up the room. "Definitely." As they walked toward the parking lot, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the private investigator inside taking photographs with a telephoto lens. William Montgomery was a thorough man, and when his daughter started exhibiting unusual behavior, he made it his business to understand why. Within hours, he would have detailed reports about Sophie's after-school activities, her secret research lab, and her growing relationship with the scholarship student he had just paid to have expelled. The game was about to change in ways that none of them could have anticipated. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Marcus Chen received a phone call that would alter the trajectory of his life. He was in the small kitchen of his family's apartment, eating cereal before school, while his mother prepared for her morning shift at the hospital where she worked as a cleaning supervisor. "Marcus Chen." The voice on the phone was formal, official. "Yes?" "This is Principal Harrison from Westfield Academy. I need you to come to my office before first period this morning. There's an important matter we need to discuss." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What kind of matter?" "We'll discuss it when you arrive. Please come directly to the main office." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone. His mother looked up from packing her lunch. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" "I think so," Marcus lied. "Just need to meet with the principal about something." Mei Chen studied her son's face with the keen perception of a mother who had sacrificed everything for her child's education. She had worked double shifts for months to help pay for Marcus's prep courses and application fees. The scholarship to Westfield Academy represented their family's best hope for breaking the cycle of financial struggle. "Marcus," she said in Mandarin, switching to their native language as she always did when the conversation was serious. "Is someone giving you trouble at that school?" "No, Ma. It's probably just about course scheduling or something administrative." She nodded, but her expression remained concerned. "Remember what I've always told you? You don't have to be grateful for opportunities you've earned. You belong at that school just as much as anyone else." Marcus kissed his mother goodbye and headed for the subway, but her words echoed in his mind during the 40-minute commute to Westfield Academy. By the time he reached the school's imposing brick facade, his anxiety had crystallized into a cold certainty that something was very wrong. Principal Harrison's office was located in the administrative wing, behind heavy oak doors that seemed designed to intimidate. Marcus had only been inside once before, during his initial enrollment interview. Now, as he sat in the waiting area, he noticed details he had missed the first time: the oil paintings of former headmasters, the leather-bound volumes of school history, the subtle but unmistakable message that Westfield Academy was an institution with traditions that predated most students' families. "Mr. Chen," the secretary's voice startled him from his thoughts. "Principal Harrison will see you now." Harrison was a tall, thin man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of measured speech that suggested every word was carefully considered. His office was spacious and formal, with a large window overlooking the campus quad and walls lined with diplomas and awards. "Marcus, please sit down." Harrison gestured to a chair facing his desk. "Thank you for coming in this morning." "Is everything all right, sir?" Harrison picked up a manila folder from his desk and opened it slowly. "I'm afraid we need to discuss your academic performance and your integration into the Westfield community." Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. "My grades are fine. I have an A average in all my classes." "Yes, your grades are adequate," Harrison agreed. "But academic performance at Westfield encompasses more than just test scores. We pride ourselves on developing well-rounded students who contribute positively to our school culture." "I don't understand what you're saying." Harrison leaned back in his chair, adopting what Marcus recognized as a practiced expression of sympathetic authority. "Marcus, the transition to an institution like Westfield can be challenging for students from different backgrounds. Sometimes, despite everyone's best intentions, a particular environment simply isn't the right fit." The euphemisms were becoming clearer, and Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "Are you saying I don't fit in because I'm not wealthy?" "Not at all. However, there have been some incidents, confrontations with other students, disruptions to the academic environment. Several parents have expressed concerns about the social dynamics in your classes." "What incidents? What confrontations?" Harrison consulted the folder again. "Yesterday's altercation in the main hallway, for example. Multiple witnesses reported that you were involved in a disruptive confrontation that required intervention from other students." Marcus stared at the principal in disbelief. "I was being harassed by 5 guys who were trying to steal my money. Sophie Montgomery stopped them. How does that make me disruptive?" "The specifics are less important than the pattern, Marcus. When these kinds of situations arise repeatedly, we have to consider whether a student might be happier and more successful in a different environment." "A different environment like a public school?" Harrison's expression remained neutral. "I'm simply suggesting that sometimes a fresh start can be beneficial for everyone involved." Marcus felt the conversation slipping away from him, but he couldn't quite grasp what was happening. His grades were excellent. He hadn't caused any trouble. The only incident Harrison had mentioned was when he was the victim of harassment. "Sir, I don't want a fresh start. I want to stay at Westfield. This scholarship means everything to my family." "I understand that, Marcus, and I want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly. The board has reviewed your file extensively, and we've concluded that your academic goals might be better served at an institution more suited to your particular background and circumstances." "What does that mean, exactly?" Harrison handed him a letter with the Westfield Academy letterhead. "Your scholarship is being terminated effective immediately. You'll need to clean out your locker today, and arrangements will be made for you to complete the semester at your local public school." Marcus read the letter twice, but the words didn't make sense. The official language talked about academic fit and mutual benefit, but the meaning was clear. He was being expelled without cause. "This is because I'm poor," Marcus said quietly. "This is because I don't belong to the right family or the right social class." "Marcus, I understand you're disappointed, but—" "No, you don't understand." Marcus stood up, the letter crumpled in his hand. "You don't understand what this scholarship meant. You don't understand that my mother works 3 jobs so I can have opportunities like this. You don't understand that you're destroying my future because some rich parents don't want their kids going to school with someone like me." Harrison's expression hardened slightly. "That's enough, Mr. Chen. I'm sorry this didn't work out, but the decision is final. Please collect your belongings and leave campus by noon." Marcus walked out of the office in a daze, the letter still clutched in his hand. The hallways of Westfield Academy, which had never felt welcoming, now seemed actively hostile. Students looked at him differently, as if they somehow already knew he no longer belonged. He was at his locker, mechanically removing his textbooks and personal items, when Sophie found him. "Marcus, what are you doing?" He handed her the letter without speaking. Sophie read it quickly, her expression shifting from confusion to anger to something that looked like fear. "This is impossible. You haven't done anything wrong. Your grades are perfect." Apparently, perfect grades aren't enough when rich parents complain about the scholarship kids. Sophie read the letter again, more carefully this time. "Marcus, this isn't random. Someone specifically targeted you." "What do you mean?" "Look at the language. This isn't a standard academic dismissal. This is personal." Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone wanted you gone, and they had enough influence to make it happen." Marcus closed his locker for the final time and shouldered his backpack. "It doesn't matter who or why. It's over." "No, it's not over." Sophie grabbed his arm. "Meet me in room 237 tonight, 7 o'clock. "Sophie, I'm not a Westfield student anymore. I can't just show up on campus." "Then I'll pick you up. Give me your address." Marcus hesitated. Sophie had never seen where he lived, had never been exposed to the reality of his economic circumstances. The thought of her luxury car pulling up to his rundown apartment building was humiliating. "Sophie, you don't understand. We live in a different world than you do." "Give me your address, Marcus. Trust me." Against his better judgment, Marcus wrote down his address and handed it to her. Then he walked out of Westfield Academy for what he assumed would be the last time, unaware that Sophie Montgomery was already formulating a plan that would expose secrets powerful enough to destroy her father's empire. That evening, at exactly 7 o'clock, Sophie Montgomery pulled up to Marcus's apartment building in a car that immediately drew stares from the neighborhood kids. But it wasn't the gleaming BMW that Marcus had expected. Instead, Sophie drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a few dents and a faded paint job. Marcus came downstairs and got into the passenger seat looking confused. "Where's your usual car?" "This is my usual car," Sophie replied, pulling away from the curb. "The BMW belongs to my father. I only drive it when he insists on maintaining appearances." They drove in silence for several minutes before Marcus spoke again. "Where are we going?" "Back to Westfield. But first, I need to show you something." Sophie reached into the center console and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I did some digging today. Called in a few favors from friends whose parents work in finance and legal services." "What kind of favors?" "The kind that reveal who's been making large donations to Westfield Academy in the past 48 hours. Marcus opened the envelope and found bank records, donation receipts, and what appeared to be email correspondence. The numbers made his eyes widen. $100,000? Someone paid the school $100,000 yesterday? Someone named William Montgomery. My father. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Marcus stared at the documents, trying to process what they meant. "Your father paid to have me expelled." "It looks that way. The donation was made the same day you were called to Harrison's office. The timing isn't coincidental." Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. "But why? Why would your father care about some scholarship kid he's never met?" Sophie parked the car in the empty Westfield Academy parking lot and turned to face him. "Because he knows about us, about what we've been working on together." "How could he know?" "Because my father doesn't leave anything to chance. When his daughter starts exhibiting unusual behavior, he investigates." Sophie pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a series of photos. "These were taken 2 nights ago." The photos showed them leaving the old science wing together, walking across the parking lot, talking intensely. Someone had been watching them with a telephoto lens. "He had us followed?" "He had me followed. You were just collateral damage." Marcus leaned back in his seat, trying to absorb the enormity of what Sophie was telling him. So he paid to have me expelled because he thought I was a bad influence on you? That's part of it. But I think there's more. Sophie's expression was grim. Marcus, I've been thinking about this all day, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. What if my father knows about my research? What if he knows what I've been working on? How could he know? The same way he knew about us. If he had me followed, if he had investigators checking into my activities, they could have discovered the lab. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Sophie, if your father knows about the algorithms, then he knows I've developed technology worth billions of dollars. Technology that could make Montgomery Industries the most powerful financial firm in the world. They sat in the dark parking lot, both understanding the implications. William Montgomery wasn't just a protective father trying to control his daughter's social life. He was a businessman who had discovered that his teenage daughter had created something that could revolutionize his industry. We need to get to the lab, Sophie said finally. We need to secure the research before he can access it. And then what? Then we find out exactly how much my father knows, and we decide what we're going to do about it. As they walked across the dark campus toward the old science wing, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the private investigator inside making a phone call to report their arrival. William Montgomery was already 3 steps ahead of them, and the game they were about to play had rules they didn't even know existed. The old science wing of Westfield Academy felt different at night. The familiar hallways were shrouded in darkness, and their footsteps echoed with an ominous quality that made Marcus increasingly nervous. Sophie led the way with the confidence of someone who had made this journey many times before, but even she seemed more tense than usual. The security system in this wing was disconnected when they built the new STEM center, Sophie explained as they climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The administration basically forgot this section exists, which is why you chose it for your lab. Exactly. Hidden in plain sight. They reached room 237, and Sophie used her key to unlock the door. But as soon as they stepped inside, they both knew something was wrong. The sophisticated computer setup that had amazed Marcus the day before was gone. The monitors, the servers, the quantum computing prototype, everything had been removed. No, Sophie whispered, rushing to where her primary workstation had been. No, no, no! The room wasn't just empty, it had been professionally cleaned. There were no cables, no residual equipment, no signs that the lab had ever existed. Even the whiteboards had been erased. Sophie, Marcus said quietly, look at this. On the teacher's desk at the front of the room, someone had left a single manila envelope with Sophie's name written on it in elegant handwriting. Sophie opened it with trembling hands and found a letter on Montgomery Industries' letterhead. Read it aloud, Marcus said. Sophie's voice shook as she began. Dear Sophie, I hope you understand that everything I do is motivated by love for you and concern for your future. Your little science project was impressive, but it's time to focus on more appropriate pursuits. The equipment has been relocated to a secure facility where it will be properly evaluated by professional researchers. You are grounded indefinitely, and your credit cards have been suspended. You will report directly home after school each day until we can discuss your future more thoroughly. With love and disappointment, Dad. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He stole your research. He stole everything. 2 years of work. All of my code, all of my prototypes, all of my documentation. Can you recreate it? Sophie sank into one of the remaining chairs, looking devastated. The core algorithms are backed up in several locations, but the hardware configurations, the testing data, the refinement protocols, that's all gone. We need to call the police. And tell them what? That my father confiscated expensive equipment he probably paid for? That he's concerned about his minor daughter's extracurricular activities? Marcus began pacing the empty room, his mind racing. There has to be something we can do. Some way to prove what you had accomplished. Even if there was, Marcus, you have bigger problems right now. My father didn't just steal my research. He had you expelled. He destroyed your future to protect his control over mine." The weight of that statement settled between them. Marcus's scholarship was gone. His opportunity to attend an elite university, to break his family's cycle of financial struggle, had been eliminated by a man who saw him as nothing more than an inconvenient variable. "What did I ever do to him?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "You existed. You represented something he couldn't control." Sophie stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark campus. "Marcus, there's something else I haven't told you about my father." "What now?" "Montgomery Industries isn't just a real estate and construction company. My father has been trying to expand into financial technology for years. He's invested millions in algorithmic trading research, but his teams have never been able to develop anything with significant predictive accuracy." Marcus felt a cold realization settling in his stomach. So, when he discovered that his teenage daughter had created exactly what his professional researchers couldn't, he didn't just see it as a parenting problem, he saw it as a business opportunity. "Sophie, if your father has your algorithms, if he implements them through Montgomery Industries, he could destabilize entire markets. My research was designed to predict economic patterns, not to exploit them. In the wrong hands, that technology could cause massive financial damage." They stood in the empty room, both understanding that they were facing something much larger than a controlling parent or a lost scholarship. They were potentially witnessing the theft of technology that could reshape global economics. "We need help," Marcus said finally. "We need someone who understands both the technology and the legal implications." "I know someone," Sophie said quietly. "Dr. Elizabeth Chen at MIT. She's been trying to recruit me for their artificial intelligence program. She's also one of the leading experts on algorithmic trading ethics." "Chen, that's my last name." "I know. I looked her up after I met you." "She's your aunt." Marcus stared at Sophie in shock. "How did you know I have an aunt at MIT?" "Because I've been researching you for weeks, Marcus. I told you I needed someone I could trust, and trust requires understanding." Sophie's expression was apologetic but determined. Dr. Elizabeth Chen emigrated from China in 1995, got her PhD in computer science from Stanford, and has been at MIT for 12 years. She's published extensively on artificial intelligence applications in financial markets, and according to her faculty bio, she sends money every month to help support her sister and nephew in New York. Marcus felt his legs go weak. "You know about the money my aunt sends? I know your family has been receiving financial assistance from a source your mother never talks about. I know that assistance helped pay for your SAT prep courses and your Westfield Academy application fees. I know your aunt has been quietly supporting your education for years without taking credit for it." The revelations were coming too fast for Marcus to process. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I wanted you to trust me for who I am, not because I had connections that could help your family." Sophie moved closer to him. "But now we don't have the luxury of keeping secrets. We need Dr. Chen's help, and we need it tonight. Even if she agrees to help us, what can she do? My father has already won. He has your research, and I'm out of Westfield Academy." "Marcus, you're thinking too small. This isn't just about Westfield Academy anymore. This is about preventing my father from using stolen technology to manipulate financial markets." Sophie pulled out her phone. "And your aunt has connections we're going to need." "What kind of connections?" "The kind that can expose corporate theft and prevent economic crimes before they happen." As Sophie began dialing Dr. Chen's number, Marcus realized that his quiet life as a scholarship student was over forever. Whether they succeeded or failed in stopping William Montgomery, there would be no going back to the safety of anonymity. But for the first time since receiving that devastating phone call from Principal Harrison, Marcus felt something other than despair. He felt the possibility that they might be able to fight back. The conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Chen lasted 3 hours and changed everything. Sophie had been right about her connections. Dr. Chen's research on algorithmic trading had brought her into contact with federal regulators, financial crimes investigators, and technology ethics boards. Within an hour of hearing their story, she had conference called 2 FBI agents specializing in corporate espionage and a lawyer from the Securities and Exchange Commission. "What your father has done," Dr. Chen explained via video call from her MIT office, "potentially violates several federal laws: theft of intellectual property, manipulation of educational institutions, and if he implements Sophie's algorithms without proper disclosure, market manipulation." "But can we prove any of it?" Marcus asked. They were sitting in his family's small living room, where his mother had been quietly listening to the entire conversation with growing amazement and concern. "That's where it gets complicated," replied Agent Sarah Rodriguez from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. "We need evidence that Montgomery knowingly stole proprietary technology and intended to use it for commercial purposes. Right now, all we have is a father confiscating what he could claim was his minor daughter's hobby project." "It wasn't a hobby project," Sophie said firmly. "I have documentation proving the sophistication and commercial viability of my algorithms." "Documentation that's now in your father's possession," pointed out Agent Rodriguez. "Unless you have independent backups or witnesses who can testify to the technology's capabilities." Sophie and Marcus exchanged glances. "There might be something," Sophie said slowly. "Marcus, do you remember the demonstration I ran for you on our first night in the lab? The historical market analysis? I recorded that session and uploaded it to a secure cloud server as part of my research documentation. If that backup still exists..." Dr. Chen leaned forward on the video call. "Sophie, if you can provide independent verification of your algorithm's capabilities, along with timestamps proving you developed them before your father's acquisition, that could be enough for a preliminary investigation." "But there's another problem," interjected the SEC lawyer, James Walsh. "Even if we can prove theft of intellectual property, we need to demonstrate immediate harm or intent to commit financial crimes. Montgomery Industries hasn't actually used the algorithms yet." "How do you know that?" Marcus asked. "Because if they had, we would have detected unusual trading patterns by now. Algorithms with the capabilities Sophie described would create distinctive signatures in market data." Sophie was quiet for a moment, thinking. What if we could prove he's planning to use them? What if we could document his intentions? How would we do that? By giving him a reason to accelerate his timeline. By making him think he needs to act immediately. Marcus didn't like the direction the conversation was heading. "Sophie, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the one thing my father values more than money: control." Sophie stood up and began pacing the small living room. "He confiscated my research because he was afraid of losing control over my future. But what if I made him think he was losing control of something even more important? Such as his company's competitive advantage, his reputation in the business community, his relationship with his major investors." Dr. Chen's expression on the video call became concerned. "Sophie, you're talking about deliberately provoking a dangerous man. If your father is willing to destroy a teenager's scholarship to maintain control, what do you think he'll do if he feels his empire is threatened?" "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Sophie replied. "My father's greatest weakness is his need to control every variable. If I create enough uncertainty, he'll panic and make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Agent Rodriguez asked. "The kind that generate the evidence you need to build a case against him." Marcus felt a chill of foreboding. "Sophie, this sounds incredibly risky." "Everything worthwhile is risky, Marcus. The question is whether we're going to let my father win by default or whether we're going to fight back." Mei Chen, who had been listening quietly from the kitchen, spoke for the first time. "Sophie, you're asking my son to help you wage war against one of the most powerful men in the state. If we lose, Mrs. Chen, Marcus goes to public school and I go to Harvard to study business like my father wants. But if we win, we stop a man from using stolen technology to manipulate financial markets, and we prove that power and money don't always determine who gets justice." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Dr. A. Chen spoke from the video call. What exactly are you proposing? Sophie sat down and opened her laptop, which she had managed to retrieve from her car before her father could confiscate it. I'm proposing that we implement my algorithms ourselves, using resources my father doesn't know about. We generate preliminary results that prove their commercial viability, and then we make those results public in a way that forces my father to reveal what he's stolen. Sophie, Agent Rodriguez said carefully, what you're describing could constitute market manipulation itself. Not if we're transparent about our methodology and we don't actually trade based on the predictions. We're simply demonstrating the technology's capabilities in a controlled, academic environment. Marcus was beginning to understand Sophie's plan, and it both impressed and terrified him. You want to publish your research publicly before your father can use it. Exactly. If I can demonstrate that I developed these algorithms independently, and if I can show that my father stole them from me, then any commercial use by Montgomery Industries becomes obviously fraudulent. But how do we implement the algorithms without access to your lab equipment? Sophie smiled for the first time since discovering the empty lab. Marcus, you're forgetting that my father thinks like a businessman, not like a researcher. He took my hardware. But the real value was never in the equipment. It was in your knowledge. And in my ability to recreate everything from scratch better than before. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly on the video call. Sophie, if you can regenerate your core algorithms and run them on independent hardware, I can provide academic sponsorship through MIT. That would give your research credibility and legal protection. How long would that take? Agent Rodriguez asked. With Marcus's help and access to MIT's computing resources, maybe 2 weeks. And then? Then we publish everything. The algorithms, the testing data, the proof of concept results. We make it impossible for my father to claim the technology as his own. James Walsh from the SEC looked thoughtful. If Montgomery Industries attempted to use demonstrably stolen algorithms for commercial trading after their theft had been publicly documented, that would constitute clear market manipulation. Which is a federal crime, added Agent Rodriguez. So we're agreed? Sophie asked, looking around the room. Marcus felt the weight of the decision. 2 weeks ago, he had been an anonymous scholarship student trying to survive at an elite academy. Now he was being asked to help orchestrate a complex plan to expose corporate crime and prevent financial market manipulation. Sophie, he said finally, if we do this, there's no going back. Your father will know you're actively working against him. Marcus, he already destroyed your future to control mine. How much worse can it get? Marcus looked at his mother, who had been quietly observing the entire conversation. Mei Chen had worked 3 jobs for years to give her son opportunities she had never had. Now those opportunities were being threatened by a man who saw them as inconvenient obstacles to his control. Ma, Marcus said in Mandarin, what do you think? Mei Chen was quiet for a long moment before responding. I think, she said slowly, that some fights are worth having, even when you're not sure you can win. Marcus turned back to Sophie. Okay, let's do it. Dr. Chen smiled on the video call. I'll arrange for both of you to have temporary research positions at MIT. You can work in my lab until this is resolved. And we'll monitor Montgomery Industries for any suspicious trading activity, added Agent Rodriguez. If your father attempts to use the stolen algorithms, we'll be ready. As the call ended, Marcus realized that his life had just taken another dramatic turn. Instead of being a victim of William Montgomery's power, he was about to become an active participant in bringing that power to account. But neither he nor Sophie could anticipate how quickly and ruthlessly William Montgomery would respond once he realized his daughter was no longer under his control. The next morning, William Montgomery stood in his penthouse office, reading a report that made his blood pressure spike. His private investigator had documented Sophie's visit to Marcus Chen's apartment, her 3-hour conversation with unknown parties, and her failure to return home by her curfew. "She's escalating," he said to his assistant, Patricia, who had been managing the situation since it began. I removed the distraction, confiscated her toys, and clearly communicated my expectations. Instead of compliance, I'm getting open rebellion. "Sir, perhaps if you spoke with Sophie directly?" "I've been speaking with Sophie directly for 17 years. What I need now is to understand exactly what she discussed with the Chen family last night." William picked up his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but hoped never to use. The man who answered was someone who specialized in problems that required unconventional solutions. "Mr. Montgomery, I was wondering when you'd call. I need comprehensive surveillance on my daughter. Audio, digital communications, location tracking, everything." "That's a significant escalation, sir. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. And I need it implemented immediately." After ending the call, William walked to his office window and looked out at the city. Building his empire had required difficult decisions, some of which had crossed ethical lines. But everything he had done was ultimately for Sophie's benefit, to ensure she inherited a legacy worthy of the Montgomery name. If she couldn't understand that now, he would make sure she understood it eventually, even if that meant protecting her from herself. At MIT, Sophie and Marcus were settling into Dr. Chen's research lab, a state-of-the-art facility that made Sophie's confiscated equipment look primitive by comparison. The quantum computing array alone was worth more than most people's homes, and the processing power available was orders of magnitude beyond what Sophie had been working with. "This is incredible," Marcus said, examining the custom neural network processors. "We can run your algorithms at full scale here." "Better than full scale," Sophie replied, already deep into coding on her laptop. "I can optimize them for this architecture and push the predictive accuracy even higher." Dr. Chen approached with coffee and a concerned expression. "I just got off the phone with Agent Rodriguez. She's worried about your father's response when he realizes you're not at home." "I texted him that I was staying with a friend," Sophie said without looking up from her code. "He'll assume I'm still sulking about being grounded." "Sophie, you're 17 years old, and you haven't been home in 18 hours. Don't you think he's going to investigate?" Marcus looked up from the quantum processor configuration he was studying. "Dr. Chen is right. If your father had us followed before, he's definitely going to escalate now." "Let him escalate," Sophie said firmly. "I'm done being afraid of my father's reactions." But even as she spoke, Sophie felt a vibration from her phone. She glanced at the screen and saw 15 missed calls from her father, along with a series of increasingly angry text messages. The most recent message was simple, but ominous. "Come home now, or I will come find you." Dr. Chen saw Sophie's expression change. "What is it?" "My father knows I'm not where I'm supposed to be." "Sophie," Marcus said quietly, "maybe we should slow down. Maybe we should think about this more carefully." "No." Sophie's voice was firm, but Marcus could hear the underlying fear. "If we stop now, if we give him time to consolidate his control over my research, we'll never get another chance. But if he finds us here, then we make sure we have results to show before he does." Sophie turned back to her laptop and began coding with an intensity that bordered on frantic. Marcus watched her for a moment, recognizing the expression of someone who was running out of time. He was about to suggest they take a break when Dr. Chen's phone rang. "Dr. Chen," she answered. After listening for a moment, her expression became grave. "Yes, I understand. No, I won't confirm or deny anything without speaking to my lawyer first." She hung up and looked at Sophie and Marcus with a serious expression. "Who was that?" Sophie asked. "MIT Security. They've received inquiries about whether you two are on campus." The inquiries came from a law firm representing Montgomery Industries. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. William Montgomery wasn't just looking for his daughter, he was using his legal resources to track her down. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "Not long," Dr. Chen replied. "Once he establishes that you're here, He'll probably seek court orders to retrieve Sophie as a minor. Then we need to work faster, Sophie said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Sophie, Dr. Chen said gently, maybe it's time to consider whether this fight is worth the potential consequences. Sophie stopped typing and looked up at both of them. Dr. Chen, my father stole 2 years of my research. He destroyed Marcus's scholarship out of spite. He's planning to use my algorithms to manipulate financial markets for his own profit. If I don't stop him now, if I let him control me now, he'll control me forever. And if you fight him and lose, then at least I'll have fought. Marcus moved to stand beside Sophie's workstation. How can I help? Sophie looked at him with gratitude and something that might have been love. Help me finish this. Help me prove what we created together. As they worked through the afternoon, neither of them noticed the black sedan that pulled into the MIT parking lot or the private investigator who began photographing everyone entering and leaving the computer science building. William Montgomery was closing in, and time was running out faster than any of them realized. By evening, Sophie and Marcus had successfully recreated the core algorithms and were beginning preliminary testing on MIT's quantum computing array. The results were even better than Sophie's original research had produced, with predictive accuracy rates approaching 96%. This is incredible, Marcus said, watching the real-time analysis of historical market data. Sophie, these algorithms could revolutionize financial forecasting, or destroy global economic stability if they're misused, Sophie replied grimly, which is exactly why we can't let my father get away with stealing them. Dr. Chen had been monitoring their progress while simultaneously fielding increasingly aggressive phone calls from lawyers representing Montgomery Industries. The legal pressure was mounting, and she was beginning to worry about the safety of her young researchers. Sophie, she said, approaching their workstation, I think you need to see this. She handed Sophie a formal legal document that had been delivered to the MIT administration an hour earlier. It's a court order, Sophie said, reading quickly. My father is claiming that I'm a runaway minor in possession of stolen property belonging to Montgomery Industries. Stolen property? Marcus asked incredulously. He's the one who stole your research. But legally, anything created by a minor using resources provided by their parents can be considered family property, Dr. Chen explained. It's a weak legal argument, but it might be enough to get Sophie remanded to her father's custody while the matter is resolved. Sophie felt panic rising in her chest. How long do we have? The order takes effect tomorrow morning. Campus security will be required to detain you if you're found on MIT property. Then we publish tonight, Sophie said firmly. We release everything we've accomplished here, along with documentation proving that I developed the original algorithms independently. Sophie, you're talking about publishing groundbreaking research without peer review, without proper academic oversight. Dr. Chen, we don't have time for proper academic oversight. If my father gets control of me tomorrow, this research disappears forever. Marcus was studying the court documents more carefully. Sophie, there's something else. Look at this clause about recovery of stolen intellectual property. Sophie read the section Marcus was pointing to, and her face went pale. He's not just trying to get me back. He's trying to seize everything we've created here at MIT. Which means, Dr. Chen said slowly, that your father knows exactly what you've been working on. This isn't about a rebellious teenager anymore. This is about technology worth billions of dollars. The three of them stood in the lab, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of computing equipment and revolutionary research that could change the world, while a legal net closed around them. There's something I haven't told you, Sophie said quietly. Something I discovered in my father's files before he confiscated my lab. What? Montgomery Industries has been hemorrhaging money for the past 18 months. Bad real estate investments, failed technology acquisitions, legal settlements that haven't been made public. My father isn't just trying to control my future anymore. He's trying to save his company. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. Your algorithms aren't just a business opportunity for him. They're a lifeline, which means he'll do anything to get them back, Dr. Chen concluded. Sophie, Marcus, I think you need to consider the possibility that this situation is more dangerous than any of us realized. Before either of them could respond, Dr. Chen's phone rang. She answered it with a tense, "Dr. Chen," then listened for a moment before her expression shifted to alarm. "When? How many? Okay, thank you for the warning." She hung up and looked at Sophie and Marcus with genuine fear in her eyes. Campus security just reported that 3 black SUVs with private security personnel have surrounded the computer science building. They're not MIT personnel, and they're not law enforcement. Sophie felt her hands begin to shake. My father hired private security to retrieve me? It looks that way. Sophie, Marcus, you need to leave, now. But the research won't matter if your father's people take you into custody before we can publish it. Marcus was already backing up their work to multiple secure servers. Sophie, Dr. Chen is right. We need to go. Where? Where can we go that my father can't find us? Dr. Chen thought for a moment, then pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Agent Rodriguez? It's Dr. Chen at MIT. We have a situation that requires federal intervention. Yes, right now. She hung up and looked at Sophie and Marcus. FBI agents are en route, but it will take them 20 minutes to get here. We need to keep you safe until then. How? The old way. We hide. Dr. Chen led them to a maintenance corridor that connected the computer science building to the adjacent engineering lab. As they hurried through the narrow passage, they could hear voices and heavy footsteps in the corridors behind them. Sophie? A man's voice called. Sophie Montgomery, your father is very worried about you. The voice was professional, controlled, but there was an underlying threat that made Marcus's skin crawl. This is insane, he whispered to Sophie as they crouched in the maintenance corridor. Your father hired security contractors to kidnap you from MIT? Not kidnap, Sophie whispered back. Retrieve. Legally, he has the right to take custody of his minor daughter. Even if she's conducting research at a major university? Even then. Dr. Chen's phone vibrated with a text message. Agent Rodriguez is in the building, she whispered. But she needs us to stay hidden until she can establish jurisdiction. Dr. Chen? The voice in the corridor was closer now. We know Sophie Montgomery is in this building. We have a legal court order for her retrieval. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. Sophie closed her eyes, trying to think clearly despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Dr. Chen, is our research backed up to the secure servers? Yes, everything is uploaded and protected. Then publish it, right now. Release everything to the academic community and the financial press simultaneously. Sophie, once we do that, there's no going back. Your father will know you've made your research public. Good. Let him know. Let the whole world know what he tried to steal. Dr. Chen hesitated for only a moment before pulling out her phone and sending the commands that would release Sophie's revolutionary algorithms to the world. Within minutes, financial journalists, academic researchers, and regulatory agencies would have access to technology that could reshape global markets. And William Montgomery would discover that his daughter had just declared war in the most public way possible. The footsteps in the corridor were getting closer when they heard new voices, official, authoritative voices identifying themselves as federal agents. This is the FBI. You are on federal property conducting unauthorized security operations. Please exit the building immediately. Sophie felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew this was only the beginning. Her father's private security team might be leaving, but William Montgomery himself was just getting started. And now that her research was public, the stakes had just become much higher than a family dispute. They had become a matter of national financial security. The emergency meeting in Agent Rodriguez's Boston field office felt surreal to Marcus. Just 2 weeks ago, he had been a scholarship student worried about fitting in at an elite academy. Now he was sitting in an FBI conference room, helping federal agents understand technology that could destabilize global financial markets. The media response has been unprecedented, Agent Rodriguez reported, consulting her tablet. Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, they're all running front-page stories about the teenage AI prodigy who developed revolutionary trading algorithms. MIT has confirmed the research's authenticity, and several major universities are already requesting access to the full data set. Sophie sat at the conference table looking exhausted but determined. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, and the stress of public exposure was clearly taking its toll. "What about my father's response?" "That's what we need to discuss," interjected James Walsh from the SEC. "Montgomery Industries issued a statement this morning claiming that the algorithms were developed using company resources and represent stolen intellectual property." "That's a lie," Sophie said firmly. "I developed everything independently, using equipment I purchased with my own money." "Your own money that came from your father," Agent Rodriguez pointed out gently. "Sophie, legally, this is going to be complicated. You're a minor, your research was conducted while living in your father's home, and the courts generally assume that parents have legitimate authority over their children's activities." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "So William Montgomery can steal his daughter's research, destroy my future, and get away with it because he's wealthy and she's 17. "Not necessarily," said Dr. Chen, who had joined the meeting via video conference from MIT. "The academic community is rallying around Sophie's research. Harvard, Stanford, and MIT have all issued statements supporting her intellectual property rights. That kind of institutional backing carries significant weight. But the immediate problem," Agent Rodriguez continued, "is that your father has filed for emergency custody and is claiming that you're being manipulated by adult researchers for their own purposes." Sophie looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means he's arguing that you're a vulnerable minor who's been exploited by adults seeking to profit from your abilities. He's painting Dr. Chen, Marcus, and even us as the real villains in this situation." "That's completely backwards," Marcus protested. "But it's effective," Walsh admitted. "Public opinion is complex. Some people see Sophie as a brilliant young woman fighting for her independence. Others see her as a child being used by adults who should be protecting her." Dr. Chen leaned forward on the video call. "There's something else we need to discuss. I've been analyzing the financial markets since Sophie's research went public, and there are some concerning patterns." "What kind of patterns?" Agent Rodriguez asked. "Trading patterns that suggest someone is using Sophie's algorithms right now. The predictive models she published are being implemented by automated trading systems, and the volume of trades based on those predictions is massive." Sophie felt her stomach drop. "Someone is already using my research for commercial trading?" "Multiple someones. Wall Street firms, hedge funds, international investment banks. They've all adapted your algorithms and put them into production." "But that's exactly what we were trying to prevent," Marcus said. "Sophie published her research to stop her father from monopolizing it. And instead," Walsh said grimly, "she's given every major financial institution in the world access to technology that could destabilize global markets." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sophie had succeeded in preventing her father from controlling her algorithms, but in doing so, she had potentially created a much larger problem. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued. "I've detected trading patterns that suggest coordination between multiple firms. It's possible that someone is using Sophie's algorithms to orchestrate synchronized market movements." "Market manipulation on a global scale," Agent Rodriguez murmured. "Exactly. And if that's happening, it's a federal crime of unprecedented scope." Sophie buried her face in her hands. "I've made everything worse." "Not necessarily," Marcus said, moving to sit beside her. "Sophie, your algorithms don't just predict market movements. They can also detect market manipulation, right?" Sophie looked up, her eyes brightening with understanding. "Yes, the same pattern recognition that predicts natural market fluctuations can identify artificial ones." So we can use your technology to prove if someone is manipulating markets? Theoretically, yes. Agent Rodriguez was taking notes rapidly. Sophie, could you modify your algorithms to detect the kind of coordinated trading Dr. Chen is describing? I could, but I would need access to real-time market data and significant computing power. MIT's resources are at your disposal, Dr. Chen offered. And the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit can provide market data access, added Agent Rodriguez. Walsh from the SEC nodded approvingly. If we can prove that someone is using Sophie's algorithms to manipulate markets, we can prosecute them for securities fraud. But there's still the custody issue, Marcus pointed out. What happens when Sophie's father shows up with court orders demanding her return? Agent Rodriguez smiled grimly. If Sophie is actively assisting a federal investigation into financial crimes, she becomes a protected witness. That gives us significant leverage in any custody disputes. Sophie felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. So I help you catch whoever is manipulating markets, and in return, you protect me from my father? It's more complicated than that, Agent Rodriguez admitted. But yes, essentially. Marcus looked around the conference room, at the federal agents and lawyers who were now treating Sophie as an equal partner rather than a vulnerable minor. So what's our next step? We set a trap, Sophie said, her confidence returning. We use my algorithms to identify who's manipulating markets, and then we gather evidence to prove it. And if it turns out to be your father? Sophie met Marcus's eyes with a steady gaze. Then we stop him. But none of them could anticipate how quickly William Montgomery would adapt to his daughter's public rebellion, or how far he would go to regain control of both her and her revolutionary technology. That evening, in his penthouse office, William Montgomery finished reading the FBI's public statement about their investigation into algorithmic market manipulation. His daughter's research was now being used by federal agents to investigate financial crimes, and her status as a cooperating witness made her effectively untouchable. He had underestimated Sophie's intelligence and overestimated his ability to control her. Now he needed a new strategy, one that would regain both his daughter and her technology while neutralizing the federal investigation. William picked up his phone and dialed a number in Washington, D.C. The man who answered was someone who specialized in making federal investigations disappear. It's time to escalate, William said simply. How much escalation are we talking about? Whatever it takes. The next morning brought developments that changed the game entirely. Sophie and Marcus arrived at the FBI's Boston field office to find Agent Rodriguez looking grim and Agent Walsh from the SEC looking positively alarmed. We have a problem, Rodriguez announced as soon as they sat down. A big one. What kind of problem? Sophie asked. Walsh pulled out a tablet and showed them a series of financial charts. Someone used your algorithms to predict and profit from the European market crash that happened 3 hours ago. Marcus studied the charts, his expression growing more concerned by the moment. How much profit are we talking about? Preliminary estimates suggest around $2 billion in coordinated gains across multiple investment firms. Sophie felt the color drain from her face. Someone used my research to cause a market crash? Not cause, Rodriguez clarified. Predict and profit from. But the scale of the coordinated trading suggests advanced knowledge that goes beyond normal algorithmic prediction. What does that mean? Dr. Chen joined the conversation via video call from MIT, her expression serious. It means someone didn't just use your algorithms to predict the crash, Sophie. They used them to help cause it. That's impossible. My algorithms are designed to predict market movements, not create them. But if you combine predictive algorithms with massive coordinated trading, Walsh explained, you can create self-fulfilling prophecies. You predict a market movement, then execute trades large enough to cause the movement you predicted. Marcus felt a cold realization settling in. That's not just market manipulation. That's economic warfare. And it's definitely a federal crime, Rodriguez added. The question is, Who has the resources and expertise to weaponize Sophie's research this quickly? Sophie's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her expression shifted to fear. "What is it?" Marcus asked. Sophie showed him the message. "Come home, and this stops. Stay away, and it gets worse. Dad." The room fell silent as everyone understood the implication. William Montgomery wasn't just threatening his daughter anymore, he was threatening global financial stability. "He's behind the market manipulation," Sophie said quietly. "My father is using my algorithms to crash markets until I come home." Agent Rodriguez was already on her phone, calling for emergency financial crime units. "We need to move fast. If Montgomery Industries is behind this morning's market crash, they're probably planning more." "But how is that possible?" Marcus asked. "Sophie only published her research yesterday. How could her father implement it so quickly?" Sophie's expression grew even more grim. "Because he's had my research for weeks. He didn't just steal my lab equipment, he stole my algorithms and has been developing them in secret." "Which means," Dr. Chen said from the video call, "that while we were working to recreate Sophie's research at MIT, her father was already implementing it for commercial use." "But now that Sophie's research is public," Walsh pointed out, "we can prove that Montgomery Industries is using stolen intellectual property for market manipulation. If we can gather enough evidence before he causes more economic damage," Rodriguez added. Sophie stood up from the conference table, her expression determined. "Then let's gather evidence, but we need to work fast." "Sophie," Marcus said carefully, "your father just demonstrated that he's willing to crash international markets to control you. Are you sure you want to keep fighting him?" Sophie looked at Marcus, then at the federal agents who were treating her as an equal partner in a criminal investigation that could reshape how financial markets were regulated worldwide. "Marcus, 3 weeks ago, you were just a scholarship student trying to survive at an elite academy. I was just a rich girl pretending to be interested in computer science as a hobby. Now we're working with the FBI to stop international financial crimes." "Your point?" "My point is that some fights choose you, whether you're ready for them or not. My father chose this fight when he decided to steal my research and destroy your future. Now we finish it." As Sophie and Marcus prepared to help federal agents trace the most sophisticated financial crime in history, William Montgomery was already planning his next move. He had shown Sophie what he was capable of doing with her technology. Now he would show her what he was willing to do to get her back. The game was no longer about a rebellious teenager and a controlling father. It had become about preventing economic warfare disguised as family dispute, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But neither Sophie nor Marcus realized that William Montgomery's greatest weapon wasn't his wealth or his power, or even his daughter's stolen algorithms. His greatest weapon was his willingness to destroy everything, including his own empire, rather than admit he had been wrong. The FBI's Emergency Financial Crimes Task Force assembled within 6 hours, bringing together expertise from multiple agencies, international financial regulators, and academic institutions. Sophie found herself at the center of the most sophisticated criminal investigation she could have imagined, with federal agents treating her teenage insights as critical intelligence. "The pattern is becoming clearer," announced Dr. Sarah Kim, a financial crimes specialist who had flown in from Washington, D.C. "Montgomery Industries has been implementing Sophie's algorithms through a network of shell companies and international investment partnerships. They're disguising their market manipulation as legitimate algorithmic trading." Marcus studied the complex charts and data flows the FBI had assembled. "But how are they coordinating trades across so many different institutions without triggering regulatory oversight?" "That's the sophisticated part," explained Agent Rodriguez. "They're not coordinating directly. Instead, they're using Sophie's predictive algorithms to identify market vulnerabilities, then making strategic trades that trigger cascade effects." Sophie felt sick to her stomach. "They're using my research to create financial chain reactions." Exactly. One carefully placed trade causes other automated systems to react, which causes more reactions, until entire markets become unstable. Dr. Chen joined the meeting in person, having flown down from MIT. Sophie, I've been analyzing the trading patterns, and there's something else we need to consider. Your father isn't just using your algorithms to make money. What do you mean? The timing and targets of the market manipulation suggest a different goal. He's not trying to maximize profits, he's trying to demonstrate power. Agent Walsh from the SEC nodded grimly. Dr. Chen is right. If Montgomery's primary goal was profit, he would be targeting different markets and using different strategies. This looks more like economic intimidation. Intimidation of who? Marcus asked. Of anyone who might interfere with his control over Sophie, Rodriguez replied. He's showing the world what he can do with her technology if people don't cooperate with his demands. Sophie stood up and walked to the window overlooking Boston Harbor. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. Her research, which she had developed to advance economic theory, was being used to threaten global financial stability. There's something I haven't told you, she said without turning around. Something about my father's business that might explain why he's willing to take such extreme risks. What? Montgomery Industries is in much worse financial trouble than anyone knows. I accessed some of his private financial records before he confiscated my lab. The company is leveraged beyond anything that's been publicly disclosed. If certain investments fail, if certain contracts are canceled, Montgomery Industries could collapse entirely. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. So he's not just using your algorithms to make money, he's using them to prevent financial ruin. And if his company collapses, Dr. Chen added, he loses all leverage over Sophie's future. Agent Rodriguez was taking notes rapidly. Sophie, how certain are you about your father's financial situation? Completely certain. I have documentation, but it's all on my personal laptop, which is in your father's possession, Marcus finished. Actually, Sophie said, turning back to face the room, it's not. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a laptop that Marcus had never seen before. I bought this with money from my trust fund 3 months ago and never told my father about it. All of my financial research, including documentation of Montgomery Industries' real financial situation, is backed up on encrypted servers that only I can access. The room erupted in excited conversation as agents realized they now had access to William Montgomery's private financial records that could prove motive for his market manipulation schemes. Sophie, Agent Rodriguez said carefully, what you're offering could be the key to our entire case. But using private financial records obtained by a minor without parental consent raises serious legal questions. Not if the records prove ongoing criminal activity, Walsh interjected. If Montgomery Industries is engaging in market manipulation to prevent bankruptcy, that's securities fraud on a massive scale. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Sophie, are you absolutely certain about what those records contain? Sophie opened her laptop and began pulling up encrypted files. Judge for yourself. The financial documents Sophie displayed painted a picture of a business empire on the verge of collapse. Montgomery Industries owed over $3 billion in leveraged debt, had defaulted on several major construction contracts, and was facing lawsuits that could result in bankruptcy within months. My God, whispered Dr. Kim, studying the numbers. If these figures are accurate, Montgomery Industries should have filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months ago. Instead, Sophie said grimly, my father has been using increasingly desperate measures to keep the company afloat, including stealing my research to create the ultimate get-rich-quick scheme. Marcus was studying the financial projections Sophie had created. Sophie, according to your analysis, your father needs to generate approximately $2 billion in the next 90 days to avoid bankruptcy, which is exactly what he generated from this morning's market manipulation, Agent Rodriguez observed. But it's not sustainable, Dr. Chen pointed out. Each market manipulation gets harder to disguise and creates more regulatory attention. Eventually, he'll get caught. Unless he doesn't plan to stop, Sophie said quietly. What if my father isn't trying to save Montgomery Industries long-term? What if he's just trying to generate enough money to disappear with my technology? The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. If William Montgomery was planning to abandon his failing company and start over with Sophie's algorithms, he would have no incentive to limit the economic damage he caused. "We need to move fast," Rodriguez said finally. "If Montgomery is planning an exit strategy, he might escalate his market manipulation beyond anything we've seen." "What's our next step?" Marcus asked. "We set a trap," Sophie replied, her voice gaining strength. "We use my father's desperation against him." "How?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, formulating a plan that would be either brilliant or catastrophic. "We leak information suggesting that I'm developing an even more powerful version of my algorithms. Something that could predict market movements with near-perfect accuracy." "Sophie," Dr. Chen said carefully, "that's incredibly dangerous. If your father believes you have technology that powerful, he'll do anything to get it, including making mistakes that prove his criminal activity." Agent Rodriguez was shaking her head. "Sophie, you're talking about using yourself as bait to catch one of the most powerful men in the country. The risks are enormous." "The risks of not catching him are worse," Sophie replied firmly. "Agent Rodriguez, my father just crashed European markets to send me a message. If we don't stop him, he'll keep escalating until he destroys global financial stability." Marcus felt torn between admiration for Sophie's courage and fear for her safety. "Sophie, what if your father calls your bluff? What if he realizes the new algorithms don't exist? Then we make sure they do exist." Sophie turned to Dr. Chen. "How long would it take to develop a theoretical framework for algorithms more powerful than what I've already created?" "Sophie, that could take months or years of research. I'm not talking about actually building them. I'm talking about creating convincing documentation that makes it look like I've already built them." Dr. Chen's expression shifted to understanding. "You want to create fake research that's sophisticated enough to fool your father's experts?" "Exactly. And while he's trying to steal fake algorithms, we gather evidence of his market manipulation and financial crimes." The FBI agents exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by the audacity of Sophie's plan, but concerned about the risks. "Sophie," Agent Rodriguez said finally, "what you're proposing is essentially an undercover operation targeting your own father. Are you emotionally prepared for that?" Sophie looked around the room at the federal agents, researchers, and Marcus, who had become her closest allies in a fight she never wanted to have. "Agent Rodriguez, 3 days ago I thought my biggest problem was convincing my father to let me study artificial intelligence instead of business. Now I'm trying to prevent him from using my research to commit international financial crimes. I passed emotionally prepared a long time ago." "Then let's do it," Rodriguez said, making a decision that would either solve the case or put Sophie in more danger than anyone could predict. As the FBI began planning the most sophisticated financial crimes sting operation in history, with a 17-year-old girl as the key operative, William Montgomery was finalizing his own plans. He had demonstrated his power by crashing markets. Now he would demonstrate his reach by making sure his daughter had nowhere left to run. The game between father and daughter had become a battle for the future of global financial security, and neither side could afford to lose. The plan took shape over the next 48 hours, with Sophie working alongside FBI agents, financial crime specialists, and MIT researchers to create what appeared to be revolutionary advances in algorithmic trading technology. The fake research was sophisticated enough to fool experts while containing subtle flaws that would prevent actual implementation. "This is incredible work," Dr. Chen said, reviewing Sophie's fabricated documentation. "If I didn't know it was fake, I would believe you had achieved a breakthrough that shouldn't be possible for another decade." Marcus was studying the false mathematical proofs Sophie had created. "How did you make this so convincing?" "By building on real theoretical foundations," Sophie explained. The underlying mathematics are sound, but there are intentional gaps in the implementation logic. Anyone trying to actually use these algorithms would eventually discover they don't work, but not until after investing significant time and resources. Agent Rodriguez joined them in MIT's secure conference room. The leak has been planted. Financial bloggers and industry insiders are already reporting rumors that you've developed next-generation market prediction algorithms with unprecedented accuracy. How long before my father hears about it? Based on our monitoring of his communication networks, probably within hours. Sophie felt her stomach tighten with nervous energy. And then? Then we wait and see how he responds. But Sophie, once this operation begins, there's no going back. Your father will know you're actively working against him. He already knows that. The question is whether he'll take the bait. Dr. Chen looked concerned. Sophie, what if your father doesn't try to steal the fake algorithms? What if he decides to escalate his market manipulation instead? That's a risk we have to take, but I know my father. He's spent his entire career trying to control every variable, eliminate every uncertainty. The possibility that I've developed technology more powerful than what he stole from me will drive him crazy. Marcus was studying the financial monitoring equipment the FBI had set up in the lab. How will we know if the plan is working? We'll see increased surveillance on MIT, attempts to hack into my research accounts, and possibly direct contact attempts, Agent Rodriguez explained. We have the entire campus under FBI protection, and we're monitoring all electronic communications related to Sophie's research. What about physical approaches? That's where it gets more dangerous. If your father decides to send people to retrieve you directly, we'll have to respond in real time. Sophie's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her blood turn cold. What is it? Marcus asked, seeing her expression. Sophie showed him the message. I know what you're working on. I know who you're working with. Last chance to come home voluntarily. He's responding faster than we expected, Agent Rodriguez observed. There's another message, Sophie said, as her phone buzzed again. This time the message was longer. Sophie, I've spent millions developing your original algorithms. If you think I'll allow you to make them obsolete with new research, you're mistaken. I have resources you can't imagine and patience you've underestimated. Come home now, or watch me demonstrate exactly what your technology can do to global markets. The room fell silent as everyone realized that William Montgomery wasn't just taking the bait. He was issuing a direct threat to escalate his market manipulation unless Sophie surrendered. He's calling our bluff, Marcus said quietly. No, Sophie replied, her voice steady despite her fear. He's revealing his hand. That message is essentially a confession that he's using my algorithms for market manipulation. Agent Rodriguez was already on her phone, coordinating with other FBI units. Sophie's right. We just got him to admit criminal activity in writing. This message is evidence. But he's also threatening to cause more market crashes, Dr. Chen pointed out. Sophie, your father is essentially holding global financial stability hostage until you surrender. Sophie stood up and walked to the window overlooking the MIT campus. Students were walking between classes, completely unaware that their university had become the center of an international financial crimes investigation. Agent Rodriguez, Sophie said without turning around, how much economic damage could my father cause if he really wanted to? With the technology he's stolen from you and the resources of Montgomery Industries, potentially billions of dollars in losses across multiple markets. And how many people would be affected? Millions, maybe tens of millions if the market disruptions spread globally. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, weighing the impossible choice her father had forced on her. Surrender and allow him to monopolize technology that could reshape financial markets or continue fighting and risk global economic catastrophe. There's a third option, she said finally, turning back to face the room. What? We don't wait for my father to make his next move. We force him to reveal everything by making him think he's already lost. Marcus looked puzzled. How do we do that? Sophie smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. We publish the fake algorithms publicly. We make my father think I've just given away technology more powerful than anything he's stolen. Sophie, Dr. Chen said carefully, if you publish fake research claiming revolutionary breakthroughs in algorithmic trading, the financial community will implement those algorithms immediately. When they discover the algorithms don't work, the resulting market chaos will force my father to use his real algorithms to capitalize on the situation, Sophie finished. And that's when we catch him. Agent Rodriguez stared at Sophie with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're talking about deliberately creating market instability to flush out your father's criminal activity. I'm talking about using my father's greed and desperation against him. He won't be able to resist the opportunity to profit from chaos in the markets. But Sophie, Marcus said, if this plan goes wrong, if we can't prove your father's involvement quickly enough, you'll be responsible for significant financial damage. Sophie looked around the room at the people who had become her allies in a fight she never wanted to have. Marcus, my father is already responsible for significant financial damage. The difference is that if we do nothing, he'll keep causing damage indefinitely. If we act, we might be able to stop him permanently. The room was silent as everyone contemplated the audacity and risks of Sophie's plan. Finally, Agent Rodriguez spoke. Sophie, what you're proposing is the most complex financial crime sting operation the FBI has ever attempted. If it works, we'll have evidence to prosecute one of the most sophisticated financial criminals in history. If it fails, Sophie said quietly, my father wins, and we all live with the consequences of not trying to stop him. As the FBI began planning an operation that would either prevent international financial crimes or inadvertently cause them, William Montgomery was making plans of his own. He had given Sophie one last chance to surrender voluntarily. Now he would show her what happened to people who underestimated the reach of his power. The final confrontation between father and daughter was about to begin, and the global financial system would never be the same. The decision to implement Sophie's plan was made at the highest levels of federal law enforcement, with approval from the Attorney General and coordination with international financial regulators. Within 18 hours, Sophie's fake algorithmic research was published simultaneously in academic journals, financial publications, and technology blogs worldwide. The response was immediate and dramatic. Financial institutions across the globe began implementing what they believed were revolutionary new trading algorithms, not realizing they were based on intentionally flawed mathematics. By noon, automated trading systems based on Sophie's fake research were generating massive volumes of seemingly profitable trades. It's working, Dr. Kim reported from the FBI's Financial Monitoring Center. Trading volume has increased by 400% in major markets, and most of it appears to be based on algorithmic implementations of Sophie's published research. Marcus watched the real-time market data with growing concern. Sophie, how long before people realize the algorithms don't actually work? The flaws are subtle, Sophie replied, monitoring multiple computer screens. It might take days or weeks for institutions to recognize that their apparent profits are based on accounting errors rather than real market movements. Agent Rodriguez joined them in the monitoring room. Sophie, we're already seeing responses from Montgomery Industries. Your father's trading patterns changed dramatically as soon as your research went public. Show me. Rodriguez pulled up a series of charts showing Montgomery Industries' trading activity. Here's the pattern from before your publication, and here's what happened afterward. Sophie studied the data, recognizing patterns that confirmed her worst fears. He's not just implementing the fake algorithms. He's shorting every market position that would be profitable if the algorithms actually worked. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means my father figured out that my research is fake, and he's betting against everyone who's implementing it. When the markets realize the algorithms don't work, he'll make billions from their losses. Dr. Chen looked alarmed. Sophie, your father isn't just avoiding the trap. He's turning it into his biggest market manipulation scheme yet. Which means, Agent Rodriguez said grimly, "that we've just helped him orchestrate the largest financial fraud in history." The room fell silent as everyone realized the magnitude of what was happening. Sophie's plan to trap her father had instead provided him with the perfect opportunity to exploit global financial markets on an unprecedented scale. "How much money are we talking about?" Sophie asked quietly. Dr. Kim consulted her calculations. "If Montgomery Industries is correctly positioned to profit from the inevitable collapse of trades based on your fake algorithms, and if that collapse happens suddenly, we could be looking at profits in the tens of billions of dollars. And losses of the same magnitude for everyone else," Marcus added. Sophie felt sick to her stomach. Her attempt to stop her father had instead enabled the largest financial crime in history. "We have to warn people. We have to tell them the algorithms are fake before they lose everything." "If we do that," Agent Rodriguez pointed out, "we lose any chance of catching your father. He'll claim he was just a savvy investor who recognized flawed research before others did. But if we don't do it, millions of people will lose their life savings." The moral dilemma was impossible. Warn the financial community and let William Montgomery escape justice, or allow massive financial losses in order to gather evidence for prosecution. "There might be a third option," Dr. Chen said slowly. "Sophie, what if we could prove that your father knew your research was fake before he positioned his trades?" "How could we prove that?" "If we could demonstrate that he had inside information about your research being deliberately falsified, his trading patterns would constitute clear evidence of criminal fraud." Marcus was beginning to understand. "You mean if we could prove that William Montgomery knew Sophie was working with the FBI to create fake algorithms? Then his trades wouldn't be savvy investing. They would be market manipulation based on material non-public information," Agent Rodriguez finished. Sophie looked around the room at the federal agents and researchers who had become her partners in an increasingly complex game. "How do we prove my father had inside information?" "We give him information that only someone with inside access could know," Rodriguez replied, "and then we document his response." "Another trap?" "A final trap. But this one will be much more dangerous, Sophie. If your father realizes we're feeding him false information to gather evidence, he might decide that the only way to win is to eliminate the people who can testify against him." The implication hung in the air like a threat. William Montgomery had already demonstrated his willingness to manipulate global markets to maintain control over his daughter. How far would he go to protect himself from federal prosecution? "What kind of information are you talking about?" Sophie asked. "Information about FBI surveillance methods, about our evidence-gathering techniques, about our timeline for making arrests. Information that would be incredibly valuable to someone trying to avoid prosecution." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "You want Sophie to pretend to give her father inside information about the FBI investigation." "We want Sophie to offer her father a deal. Information about our investigation in exchange for his agreement to stop the market manipulation." "But that would be entrapment," Sophie said quietly. "You want me to entrap my own father?" Agent Rodriguez nodded solemnly. "Sophie, your father has committed financial crimes that could destabilize global markets. Traditional investigation methods aren't working because he's too smart and too careful. This might be our only chance to gather enough evidence to stop him." Sophie walked to the window and looked out at the city below, where millions of people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their financial security was being threatened by an increasingly desperate man with access to technology that could predict and manipulate their economic futures. "If I do this," she said without turning around, "if I help you entrap my father, I'll never be able to have a relationship with him again." "Sophie," Marcus said gently, "do you really think you could have a relationship with him anyway? After everything he's done?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment before responding. "No, I don't think I could." She turned back to face the room. "What exactly do you need me to do?" As the FBI began planning the most sensitive undercover operation in financial crimes history, with a 17-year-old girl as the key operative targeting her own father, William Montgomery was preparing for what he assumed would be his final victory. He had turned his daughter's trap against her, positioning himself to profit massively from global financial chaos. What he didn't realize was that Sophie Montgomery was no longer the rebellious teenager who had danced with a scholarship student 3 weeks earlier. She had become something much more dangerous, a young woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The final confrontation was about to begin, and only one of them would emerge with their future intact. The meeting was arranged for neutral ground, a conference room in a downtown Boston hotel where William Montgomery regularly conducted business. Sophie arrived with Agent Rodriguez, who posed as her legal advisor, while FBI surveillance teams monitored from adjacent rooms. William Montgomery looked older than Sophie remembered, with stress lines around his eyes and a tension in his posture that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. But his voice was controlled and authoritative when he spoke. "Sophie, I'm glad you finally decided to be reasonable." "I'm here to discuss terms," Sophie replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not to surrender." William smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're hardly in a position to dictate terms. Your fake research has created exactly the market chaos I needed to implement my final strategy. By tomorrow, Montgomery Industries will have generated enough profit to be completely independent of any financial pressures. And what about the millions of people who will lose money when they discover my algorithms don't work? That's the price of their greed and gullibility. I didn't force anyone to implement unverified technology." Sophie felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. The FBI was recording everything, and she needed her father to reveal as much as possible about his criminal activities. "Dad, you could have made money legitimately with my original research. Why did you choose to steal it and use it for market manipulation?" William leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter with the calculating gaze she remembered from childhood. "Because legitimate profits take time, and I didn't have time. Montgomery Industries was facing bankruptcy, and your technology was the only thing that could save it. So you decided to save your company by committing financial crimes? I decided to save my legacy by using every resource available to me, including technology developed by my daughter using resources I provided." Agent Rodriguez, maintaining her cover as Sophie's legal advisor, leaned forward. "Mr. Montgomery, are you saying you believe you have legal rights to your daughter's intellectual property?" "I'm saying I have parental rights that supersede any claims Sophie might make to independent ownership of technology developed while she was a minor living in my home." Sophie realized her father was being careful not to explicitly admit to criminal activity, even though his actions clearly constituted market manipulation. She needed to push him further. "Dad, what if I told you I could help you avoid prosecution?" William's expression sharpened with interest. "What kind of help?" "I know things about the FBI investigation that might be valuable to you." "What kinds of things?" Sophie glanced at Agent Rodriguez, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I know their timeline for making arrests. I know what evidence they have and what they're still looking for. I know which financial institutions are cooperating with federal investigators." William was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the implications. "And what would you want in return for this information?" "I want you to stop the market manipulation. I want you to return my original research. And I want you to leave Marcus Chen alone." "The scholarship boy?" "Sophie, surely you realize that your association with him was what started this entire situation." "My association with Marcus showed me what kind of man you really are," Sophie replied. "Someone who destroys innocent people to maintain control." William's expression hardened. "I protected you from a distraction that would have derailed your future. Everything I've done has been for your benefit. You paid to have an innocent student expelled from school. You stole my research and used it to manipulate financial markets. You threatened global economic stability to force me to come home. How is any of that for my benefit?" "Because it ensures that you inherit a legacy worth preserving instead of watching it collapse due to your adolescent rebellions." Sophie felt a moment of genuine sadness for the man her father had become, someone so obsessed with control and legacy that he had lost sight of basic human decency. "Dad, if I give you information about the FBI investigation, will you agree to stop the market manipulation and return my research?" William considered the offer carefully. "What specific information are you offering?" "Everything. Surveillance methods, investigation timeline, evidence they've gathered, cooperation agreements with other agencies, everything I've learned while working with them." "And in return?" "You use your profits from today's trading to close out all positions based on my algorithms. You transfer ownership of my original research back to me, and you leave Marcus and his family alone permanently." William was quiet for several minutes, clearly calculating whether the information Sophie offered was worth more than continued market manipulation. "If I agree to your terms," he said finally, "how do I know you won't simply provide false information?" "Because I'll prove the information is real by giving you something you can verify immediately." Sophie reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document that Agent Rodriguez had prepared specifically for this moment. "This is the FBI's planned arrest warrant for you. It's dated for next Friday." William took the document and studied it carefully. The warrant was genuine in every detail except the date. The real arrest was planned for much sooner. "This appears authentic," he said slowly. "It is authentic, and it shows you exactly what charges the FBI is planning to file and what evidence they're basing those charges on." William read through the warrant more carefully, his expression growing increasingly concerned as he realized the scope of the federal case against him. "They have more evidence than I realized," he admitted. "They have enough to convict you unless you stop giving them new evidence to collect." William looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and resignation. "You've become quite sophisticated in your methods, Sophie. I learned from watching you." "Very well. I agree to your terms. I'll close out my positions based on your algorithms, return your original research, and leave the Chen family alone. In return, you'll provide complete information about the FBI investigation." Sophie felt a moment of triumph mixed with sadness. Her father had just confessed to market manipulation and agreed to provide evidence of his crimes in exchange for information he thought would help him avoid prosecution. "I'll have the information ready for you tomorrow," Sophie said. "Excellent. I'll begin closing my market positions immediately." As William Montgomery left the hotel conference room, believing he had just negotiated his way out of federal prosecution, FBI surveillance teams were already coordinating the largest financial crimes arrest in history. Sophie had succeeded in gathering the evidence needed to convict her father, but the victory felt hollow. She had saved the financial futures of millions of people by destroying her relationship with the only family she had left. Marcus found her sitting alone in the hotel lobby 20 minutes later, staring out at the Boston traffic. "It's over," she said quietly as he sat down beside her. "You did the right thing, Sophie." "I know, but that doesn't make it hurt less." Marcus took her hand, understanding that some victories came at costs that couldn't be measured in money or justice. "What happens now?" Sophie looked at Marcus, at the young man who had started as a scholarship student being bullied at an elite academy and had become her partner in stopping international financial crimes. "Now we figure out what comes next. Together." The arrest of William Montgomery took place the following morning, as FBI agents executed warrants simultaneously at Montgomery Industries headquarters, his penthouse apartment, and several offshore financial facilities. The evidence Sophie had helped gather was overwhelming, and the financial crimes charges would ultimately result in the largest securities fraud conviction in history. Sophie's original algorithms were returned to her as part of the legal settlement, along with compensation for their theft and commercial use. She chose to place the technology under academic control, ensuring it would be used for research rather than market manipulation. Marcus's scholarship to Westfield Academy was restored, but he chose instead to accept early admission to MIT, where he would study alongside Sophie under Dr. Chen's supervision. Their research partnership had evolved into something deeper, a shared commitment to using technology for positive social impact rather than personal gain. 6 months later, Sophie and Marcus stood together in the MIT laboratory, where their story had taken its most dramatic turn. The quantum computing array hummed quietly as it processed economic models designed to detect and prevent market manipulation rather than enable it. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, watching Sophie work on algorithms that would protect financial markets rather than exploit them. Sophie looked up from her computer, considering the question. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my father chose greed and control over everything else. But I don't regret fighting back. Even though it cost you your family?" "Marcus, you taught me something important when you stood up to those bullies at Westfield Academy, even though you knew you'd probably lose." "What's that?" "That some fights are worth having, even when winning means losing things you thought you couldn't live without." Marcus moved to stand beside her, looking at the revolutionary technology they had helped create, and the federal agents who still occasionally consulted with them on financial crimes cases. "So what's next for the girl who brought down her own father's empire?" Sophie smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from her in months. "Next, we change the world, but this time, we do it the right way." As they returned to their research, working together to develop technology that would protect rather than exploit, neither of them noticed Dr. Chen watching from the doorway with an expression of quiet pride. The scholarship student who had been targeted for destruction and the billionaire's daughter who had risked everything for justice had become something more powerful than either could have achieved alone. They had become partners in a mission that would reshape how technology, power, and justice intersected in an increasingly complex world. And their story was just beginning. The final chapter of their confrontation with William Montgomery had ended, but the first chapter of their shared future was about to begin. Together, they would prove that some victories are worth any price, and that true power comes not from controlling others, but from empowering them to control their own destinies. In the end, the millionaire who had paid to expel the nerd had discovered that his daughter's greatest secret wasn't her technology. It was her courage to use that technology for justice rather than profit. And that courage had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she chose to protect. The story of Sophie Montgomery and Marcus Chen became a legend at MIT, a reminder that brilliance without conscience is merely cleverness, but brilliance with courage can change the world. Their algorithms now protected millions of investors from market manipulation, their research had revolutionized financial ethics, and their partnership had proved that the most powerful force in any equation is the decision to use power responsibly. Some fights choose you, whether you're ready or not. But sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, those fights transform you into exactly the person you were meant to become.